Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan McNeil, and this is the Builder by Day podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. You might notice things look a little different here today, and that is because I am not in my office studio. I'm actually at home. I have set up a location here in my home so that I can hopefully keep the content coming and perhaps maybe even produce a little more content. But the reason is finding it difficult to squeeze in the podcast episodes. You know, it's a busy time of year. I'm a home builder. It's spring. This is go time. You know, also the weather gets nicer outside. You're doing things. It's just, I just don't have as much available time in the spring, summer, fall months as I do in the winter. As always, thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already done, please like and subscribe. Now, today I'm going to be discussing housing, specifically affordable housing, and even more specifically, the federal government's new Build Canada Homes initiative. As everybody knows, we have a housing crisis on our hands, and we don't have enough housing, and more specifically, we don't have enough affordable housing. Mark Carney and the Liberal government have decided they are going to solve that problem by having the federal government become a home builder. And not just any home builder, not even just the largest home builder in the country, but a home builder that will be so large that it will build more homes than the entire residential construction industry combined. Now, if you think that sounds crazy, you're right. It is crazy. But let's take a closer look and see what they're planning. First of all, let's define what we're talking about here. What exactly is Build Canada Homes? Build Canada Homes, which I will refer to as BCH, is a major federal housing initiative launched in 2025 by Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal government to address Canada's housing affordability and supply crisis. It represents the most ambitious national home building effort since post-World War II era, and that is an understatement. BCH is federally led. It is a program that is designed to double Canada's annual housing construction rate to 500,000 homes a year, with a strong focus on affordability, innovation, and public-private collaboration, although that's questionable. It aims to reintroduce direct government involvement in home building, particularly on public land, while supporting private sector efforts through financing and regulatory reforms. I'm going to run through several key features of BCH. It is a federal housing developer. It establishes a new federal entity to act as a public housing developer, building affordable homes at scale on public lands, reintroducing direct government construction after decades of relying on subsidies and private developers. Support for innovative construction with over $25 billion allocated to boost domestic housing manufacturing, with a focus on prefabrication and modular construction. The aim is to build faster and more affordably while modernizing Canada's construction industry. Now, I have talked several times and at length about my concerns with respect to the government putting all its eggs in one basket when it comes to modular housing and manufactured homes. I'm going to park that for the time being, but I will be coming back to it. I'm not done with that topic. Just not going to hit on it again today because I've touched on it several times before. Deep affordability commitments. BCH includes $10 billion to support deeply affordable housing by nonprofits, Indigenous groups, co-ops, and private builders committed to building below market models. These funds reduce financing risks and support low-income Canadians. And number 4 is the regulatory and tax reform. Key measures including halving municipal development charges. What I mean by that is cutting in half the municipal development charges with federal and provincial compensation, reviving rental construction tax incentives, easing commercial to residential conversions, and streamlining approvals via the Housing Accelerator Fund, which was already in place before Mark Carney and this current government. I'm here in Nova Scotia. I know recently here in May, the federal government and Nova Scotia governments finalized a 10-year agreement under the Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund, allocating $170 million to invest in foundational infrastructure necessary to unlock sustainable long-term housing supply in Nova Scotia, whatever that means. I guess we'll find out in the weeks and months and probably years to come. Anybody out there who knows me and who follows this show, you know that I'm a critical guy and I have criticisms about things. And I definitely have criticisms about this particular plan. But I'm going to start out with some general criticisms that are not only mine, but commonly held and criticisms that I've read and seen other people sharing online in different news media. As somebody who pays close attention to the housing policies and developments, I have a number of concerns regarding Build Canada Homes initiative. While the intent is understandable given the severity of the housing crisis, there are several areas where I believe the program will fall short or face significant challenges, to say the least. Number 1, and perhaps something that you all would share with me, I'm sure. I am not confident in the government's ability to deliver housing efficiently. I'm not confident in the government's ability to deliver anything efficiently. Historically, large-scale federal construction efforts have been slowed by bureaucracy, cost overruns, and delays. Introducing a federally run development agency to build homes directly may sound ambitious, but it also introduces risks around project management and execution that private developers typically navigate with more agility. Number two, the labor market is already strained. The construction industry in Canada is facing well-documented skilled labor shortages. Meeting a target of 500,000 homes per year would require not only doubling the output, but also significantly increasing workforce capacity, something that is difficult to achieve in a short time frame. And with investment in training and immigration required, it takes years, quite frankly, to train up and achieve and acquire the skill that is necessary to do this. Number three, government involvement may disrupt existing private sector dynamics. There is a potential for unintended consequences when the government becomes a direct competitor in the housing market. This could crowd out private developers or distort market incentives, particularly if public projects receive preferential access to land, financing, and materials. In other words, there are some significant issues that we all should be very aware of if suddenly the entire residential construction industry has to compete with the government, especially if the government itself is going to be not just the largest home builder in the country, but larger than every other home builder, developer, manufacturer, tradesperson, industry member combined. There are a lot of issues there that people should be thinking about. Number four, the financial assumptions raise questions. The program carries a substantial price tag, tens of billions of dollars in new spending. It is unclear whether these funds will be deployed in a way that ensures cost effectiveness. Without clear benchmarks, oversight, and accountability, there is a risk that much of the funding could go absorbed by administrative layers or inefficient processes. In other words, there's a pretty good chance that this is going to follow the same path as every other large-scale government initiative, and the money is going to sink into a money pit and just be absorbed in administrative layers and bureaucracy. Number five is that the focus on supply doesn't fully address affordability. While increasing housing supply is important, affordability also depends on demand side factors. Issues such as speculation, foreign investment, and the financialization of housing markets all contribute to pricing pressures. If these aren't addressed in parallel, we risk building more units without achieving meaningful affordability improvements. In other words, our problem isn't just that we need to build more homes. The government, if they're going to do this, they need to build more affordable homes. And the idea that they are going to do it more affordably and more effectively and more efficiently than the private sector is, quite frankly, laughable. Now, for further take on this for me, what I find incredible about this Build Canada Homes initiative is that the government never even tried to engage with the public sector. Certainly not meaningfully. There was no collaborative process, no industry roundtable, no real attempt to sit down with the people who actually build homes for a living and ask them how it is that we can solve this problem together. They skipped that step entirely. And instead, they just decided unilaterally that they were going to do it themselves. And honestly, I find that mind-boggling to me. It is such a completely irrational thought. This isn't about tweaking a few policies or funding a few pilot projects. This is about a federal government setting out to build 500,000 homes a year. To put that in perspective, that is about double the total volume of the entire residential construction industry in Canada. And that is the public and private sector combined. And somehow they have convinced themselves they're going to match or even exceed the output of the entire private sector by setting up a federal home building agency and going it alone. That is more than just ambitious. That is completely delusional. You cannot bypass the experience, scale, and operational systems of an entire industry and just assume that you're going to build faster and better and cheaper, especially when your track record as a government is filled with delays, cost overruns, and mismanagement. There are developers and builders in this country who have spent decades optimizing how to build homes efficiently, despite the maze of zoning laws and permit delays and labor shortages and the ever rising costs of materials. These are the people who do this day in and day out, and they weren't even asked for their input. And here's the thing, if the government had come to the table with a genuine willingness to partner, offering land, financing tools, expedited approvals, maybe a framework to subsidize below market units, they would have had a private sector lined up and ready to build, because builders want to build and developers want to build. But instead of leveraging that expertise, they decided they'd rather try to reinvent the wheel and do it themselves. So now, not only do they need to figure out how to build more homes, they need to build the entire system that it takes to build homes. Procurement, project management, supply chain, trade recruitment, scheduling, inspections. They need to build all of that from scratch at a scale that rivals the entire industry. And they expect that this is somehow going to happen. And then they also think it's going to happen quickly. It goes without saying that I don't think this is going to work. I think what's going to happen is they are going to burn through billions of dollars, take forever to get anything done, take far longer than expected, and then end up delivering a fraction of what they have promised. Meanwhile, housing demands keep climbing and affordability keeps slipping further out of reach for the people who need it. If the government was serious about solving this housing crisis, they would have recognized that the private sector isn't the problem, they are the solution. But instead of doing that, instead of empowering builders, they sideline them. And we're all going to pay the price for that mistake. Now, further thoughts on this and a little bit of, some information to back up where I'm coming from. Let's just take a step back for a second and look at what's actually happening with this Build Canada Homes initiative. The federal government has announced that it plans to build, like I said, 500,000 homes a year. Not support, not facilitate, not incentivize, build. That is more than what the entire country currently produces annually. In 2023, we had around 240,000 housing starts nationwide, and that was with every private developer, home builder, tradesperson, and supplier in the country working flat out and often under strained conditions. And now the government wants to match or exceed that output by itself. The real issue here is not that we don't need more housing. Of course we do. The problem is that the federal government skipped the most obvious, most practical step, and that is to engage the private sector. There was no structured consultation with builders, no consultation with developers, trades associations, or manufacturers, no coordination with the people who have real-world, boots-on-the-ground experience in residential construction. They simply decided they were going to set up a public housing agency and do it all for themselves. So let me explain why that is not just unrealistic, it is completely disconnected from how the industry works. Canada's construction sector is made up of over 370,000 companies, the vast majority of which are small businesses, or what they call micro enterprises, which have fewer than 5 employees. These are the companies building our homes. These are the companies that already struggle to find skilled workers and navigate zoning laws and get permits approved and deal with the ever increasing cost of material. The federal government, which has no existing infrastructure in residential construction, somehow believes it is going to replicate the combined output of all of those companies. Just think about that for a second. Not only are they trying to enter the most logistically complex industry in the country, they're attempting to do it at maximum scale, without experience, without an existing workforce, and without any private sector partnerships. And it's not just about companies, it's about people. It's about skilled labor. To hit 500,000 homes a year, we need tens of thousands more electricians, framers, drywallers, HVAC techs, project managers, site supervisors, surveyors, safety inspectors, you name it. But we don't have them. And we're already dealing with massive skilled trade shortages in this country. The construction workforce is aging, apprenticeship enrollment is lagging, and the productivity hasn't meaningfully increased in decades. This isn't a case of simply throwing money at a problem. Labor doesn't scale overnight. You can't manufacture tradespeople the way you manufacture materials. These are high-skilled, high-responsibility jobs. It takes years of training and hands-on experience to do them correctly and competently, safely, and effectively. Now, let's add to that the business risk. The construction industry is one of the most difficult sectors to survive in. About 20% of new construction businesses fail within their first year, and 50% fail within the first 5 years. Even seasoned private developers struggle to stay profitable in this environment. But somehow the government thinks they are going to bypass all of that with a new crown agency and a handful of consultants. It's not a plan, folks. It's a fantasy. If the government had been serious about solving the housing crisis, they would have started by engaging the existing residential sector. They would have identified the barriers to productivity, land use policy, financing, red tape, labor shortages, and worked collaboratively to overcome them. But everybody knows builders want to build. They just need the conditions in order to build to scale. And instead, Ottawa skipped all of that. They ignored the expertise already in place. They have chosen to gamble billions of taxpayer dollars on an unproven, centralized model that doesn't reflect the complexity of this industry. So while the headlines sound ambitious and the promises politically attractive, I think most people in the construction world are looking at this and thinking, these people have absolutely no idea what they are getting into. Now, I'm going to sum it up by saying this. I'll be keeping a close eye on this as it unfolds. I am genuinely looking forward to seeing some real world examples of the homes this program produces, what they look like, how long they take to build, and what they actually cost. Because let's be honest, the government doesn't exactly have a track record of doing things with effectiveness or efficiency or being competent in anything that they take on, certainly not large scale complex projects. I have spent the last 20 years building homes, developing land, buying and selling real estate, streamlining processes, managing tradespeople, optimizing timelines, and making sure that every dollar counts. So I won't be watching this from the sidelines. My intention is to keep track of it and measure it and call out exactly where and how Build Canada Homes falls short, because I expect them to fail miserably. Now, there is a lot of cloud and question around. When I read through this and when we go through this here today, and I talk to you guys about this, I keep using the word homes, right? And that's what they for. It's Build Canada Homes. And we're talking about housing construction and affordable housing. Now, there is a whole other element to this that comes back to something else I've discussed in the past, which is the definition of a home is changing and has changed drastically in this country. We didn't used to consider sheds homes. We didn't used to consider steel shipping containers with a door and a window cut into it a home. But this government does consider those things to be homes. And this government will consider very cheaply inexpensive manufactured boxes to be homes. And so when they start rolling out, I will be keeping track of that as well and discussing it. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to take them at face value and assume that what they mean by homes is what the rest of us all think they mean by homes. But we're going to realize that this is likely going to be a disaster. And truthfully, what I think will happen here is nothing. I think nothing will happen. I think this is just all smoke and mirrors. They're going to talk. They're going to make big talk. I believe that the government is definitely going to throw hundreds of millions or billions of dollars at the manufactured home industry, because our boy Mark Carney stands to gain personally from that, since he is still deeply involved in and owns a significant share in Brookfield. And Brookfield is an enormous housing developer and deeply involved in modular manufactured homes. So I think definitely they will throw money at the modular manufactured home sector, but I do not expect this in any way to solve the affordable housing crisis or to produce the homes that they are alluding to. It's not even going to be close. It's going to be laughable. When we look back on this, it's going to be laughable. But that's it for today, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I do appreciate your support. This is a topic that I'm going to stay on. It's right in my wheelhouse. I know a lot about it. I'm going to do my best to give you my 2 cents as to what I think of this thing as it unfolds. Thanks very much for listening. I'll see you next time. Later.